Hi, my name is DeAndrea and welcome to The Real News. Today we're going to be just finishing up our subject matter concerning antidepressants. Joe Carenza is going to finish the last question he didn't get to finish on the last antidepressant show. So Elise, if you're watching, don't be angry. We're doing antidepressants again. And we also have with us our special guest, Dean Lauren.
Thank you.
And he's going to speak about myrmidons. And what is a myrmidon, Dean?
It's a subordinate who carries out orders, I think, unquestionably. And we have very many of those in the judicial system.
Yes.
Unquestioningly and without remorse.
Yes. And so Joe Carenza is the one who's giving us a dictionary education here. I didn't know what a myrmidon was before.
Like the Nazis who operated the death camps. Carrying out the orders of the Fuhrer, unquestioningly, believing in the just cause of it all, believing that they were on the side of all that was right in the world.
But let's bring that up to today, which will be the focus of today's show, which is...
Well, the question we didn't get to in the last show, we answered the question, well, we attempted to answer a very, very complex question, which was, why do we have so many people in this greatest nation, the most technologically advanced nation on the face of the planet? Why do we have so many people experiencing this type of severe depression that would need the type of antidepressant drugs and this medication that we're seeing an enormous proliferation of, and then we're also seeing a shockwave of violence and a trail of bodies leading away from the use of these types of drugs. But the question that we didn't answer during that show was, does the profit motive alone, does the financial interest in distributing these types of drugs explain the proliferation of these antidepressant drugs? Does the profit motive alone explain it in its entirety and complete? And the answer to that question is an unequivocal no. And that's what we're going to explore in this show.
That's very interesting, because I would have thought, of course, money is the main factor, but we'll see.
Right. But we're seeing something very different, right? And in order to really understand the answer to that question, the unequivocal no, we really have to understand certain things from the historical record. And the first thing I would like to inject is Smedley Butler, right? The most highly decorated general in U.S. history. And Smedley Butler, I mean, I think people in the society are familiar with Patton and Eisenhower and MacArthur, but here we have the most highly decorated general in U.S. history, a Marine Commandant, Smedley Butler. Most of the people in the society have never heard of him. Well, why not? Well, Smedley Butler was one of these guys, one of these generals who created so-called suitable climates for investment in Central America, South America. I think he was also involved in China, and he was in the Philippines, and he was one of these people that went in to pacify the indigenous population of each country. And what that usually meant is there was a pile 10 feet high of skulls and bones when they got finished there. This was the pacification. This was a euphemistic term that they used a sanitizing term to describe the machinations of the U.S. military. And he said at the time, well, he said after his military career was over, that he was a hitman for Wall Street. He was a racketeer for Wall Street. He says that
he was actually quoted saying that?
Yeah. He said that he could have taught Al Capone a few things, you know, that Al Capone just operated in a few districts around the city of Chicago. He says, I operated on 3 continents.
Wow.
Right, the Asia Pacific.
He admitted it.
Right. He actually lives, I believe, in Australia to this today.
Who's
He's
that?
Still alive?
Smedley Butler.
No, Smedley Butler died.
Then it's the junior, Smedley, his son.
Oh, really? Okay. Smedley Darlington Butler we're talking about. Okay, so we had also Smedley Butler wrote the book War is a Racket. Right? War is a Racket.
Very interesting. He's a general and he writes a book, War is a Racket.
Right.
I love it.
So it was all about war profiteering, the evils of war profiteering, and also in that book he exposes a plot by the leading industrialists and bankers in this country in the 1930s to overthrow the U.S. government, a fascist takeover of the U.S. government.
And let's make that very clear. It was November of 1937. At that point, we have Teddy Roosevelt just coming, not Teddy Roosevelt, but we have Franklin Delano Roosevelt just coming in, being reelected in 1936. At that point, the industrialists, J.P. Morgan, Ford, all of the men who will fight against unions will then launch what Joe is going to tell you about. And remember, at that point, we just have Germany unifying with Italy under the blood and steel axis for pharmaceuticals and steel, okay, the production of steel. And so, yes,
right.
Joe.
So we had an organization calling itself the American Liberty League, right? An Orwellian term, if there ever was one. These are the people that are talking about the fascist takeover of the government, and they wanted Butler to lead the U.S. military in the coup, in the takeover. They wanted to transform the United States into a Nazified police state, a totalitarian state.
What year was this again?
In the 1930s.
Amazing.
Now,
Right.
amazingly enough, what history doesn't point out is that the former governor of New York, Charlie Evans Hughes, will be sitting on the Supreme Court as the Chief Justice. So New York is in control of the United States Supreme Court. There are two judges from New York on the court. The industrialists that are financing this fascist takeover are based in New York.
Oh, that's why the Clintons came here.
And FDR, I believe, has a summer house where he'll eventually die in New York.
Long Island.
Long Island.
I think so. Okay, so I'm quoting an article here by Richard Sanders, exposing the legacy of American corporatism. And I'll just read this short passage. He describes it as such. A clique of U.S. industrialists is hell-bent to bring a fascist state to supplant our democratic government and is working closely with the fascist regime in Germany and Italy. I have had plenty of opportunity in my post in Berlin to witness how close some of our American ruling families are to the Nazi regime. A prominent executive of one of the largest corporations told me point blank that he would be ready to take definite action to bring fascism into America if President Roosevelt continued his progressive policies. Certain American industrialists had a great deal to do with bringing fascist regimes into being in both Germany and Italy. They extended aid to help fascism occupy the seat of power, and they are helping to keep it there. Propagandists for fascist groups try to dismiss the fascist scare. We should be aware of the symptoms. When industrialists ignore laws designed for social and economic progress, they will seek recourse to a fascist state when the institutions of our government compel them to comply with the provisions. Right? So they plotted this fascist takeover of the government. And then he goes on to say later in the article that although those within the highest echelons of the U.S. corporate power were willing to instigate a coup to take control of the White House, their plot against FDR was called off. As it turned out, an overt fascist coup was not actually necessary to attain their goals. So what he's saying in this article is, even though the coup was foiled, and thank you to Smedley Butler for, because instead of cooperating with the coup plotters, he endeavored to expose them. And there was actually a congressional hearing where that was convened to investigate the allegations concerning this coup. And